Hey, it's Bruce Kulick. You know me from KISS. And you're watching Get on the Bus. This is awesome. You're going to love this show.
John Bush. I play an Armored Saint. I mean, that's my main band right there. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, you know, I sometimes think Armored Saint had a little bit of a inferiority complex in the 80s because we were this really powerful band and really explosive live, but we weren't a thrash band. And so there was a thrash movement that was happening in the Bay Area. And then there was also the hair metal, I mean, we didn't call it that then, but, you know, the more popular heavy metal bands in the LA scene that were, you know, bands like Rad and you know, Black and Blue and Kill and Great White and Wasp. And then we didn't really completely fit in exactly with that style of music either. Although we played with all those bands, and we, you know, to me, we always did really well, and it was really the same audience. But we always were a little bit heavier than those bands, but we weren't quite as heavy as, like, you know, Anthrax and Testament and, you know, Slayer. So we were like, oh, what do we do? And it took some time to kind of figure out how to, like, really just say, let's focus in on just our own thing and make sure that we don't really care about what anyone else is doing. We're just going to focus on our style, our writing. And it took a few albums, I think, you know, but by the time we made, say, Symbol of Salvation 91, that was like our kind of cornerstone record. And I think that's when we really kind of did it. But, you know, I love the LA scene, and I'm super proud to be part of it. You know, we played all the clubs, the Troubadour, the Country Club, the Whiskey. You know, you could go to Orange County. There was like Jezebel's and the Woodstock, and you know, certainly in the Bay Area, the Stone, the Keystone, Ruthie's Inn. So I mean, we were all part of that whole scene, and that's how we kind of, you know, that's how we cut our teeth. That's how we learned how to really hone in on our craft, and we became a really great live band. Yeah, we made this joke that we were going to get a major record deal before 50 gigs, and we actually did that, which is pretty funny. Yeah, at one point I'd say we were probably the biggest band in LA. That was certainly after, you know, Motley Crue and Quiet Riot had already kind of gone on to, you know, to the national, international level. But at one point, you know, we played Perkins Palace, which is a legendary venue, theater in Pasadena, and I mean, it was oversold. It was like 2,300 people or 2,200 people, and that was like our signing deal to Chrysalis show. That was our major record deal. Let me point out that we were with Metal Blade Records before that. We put out an EP, and now we're back with Metal Blade and have been for years and years, and that's home really for us. But that was, you know, at that stage what happened, a lot of bands wanted to use an indie to get a major deal. And that's, you know, we did the same thing as a lot of other bands before us, and at the same time. And it was a great time to be in LA. It was we were really just having a blast. I mean, it was. I don't think there's. I mean, that's why the '80s is still happening as far as heavy metal, hard rock, because it was such a pivotal time. It'll go on for centuries. Well, I think that we had to kind of find our own niche, and once we did that, then, you know, we felt comfortable about what we were doing as far as the style of music. You know, we were always a heavy band, but we always had this kind of blues background to it as well. I love soul music. You know, some of my favorite singers are like Marvin Gaye and the O'Jays and Stevie Wonder, and like I put those guys on the same level as like Bon Scott and Rob Halford and you know, Ronnie Dio. So, you know, they meant that much to me growing up through the years of discovering music and learning about how to craft a song and how to be soulful. And, you know, so and that stayed with us. And, you know, to me, I think it's really important to listen to lots of music. You know, I love hard rock and heavy metal, but, you know, I love jazz, and I love, you know, I love old school country, and you know, you name it. I mean, I used to make my kids crazy in the morning driving to school because I'd have the classical music station on. They're like going, "What are you listening to?" But like it was 8 in the morning, I'm like, I cannot listen to rock right now. We're gonna ease into the day. Here's some Beethoven, you know. But you know, it's just about being broad-minded musically, and I think that helps with crafting songs and creating, you know, style. You know, for me, I never really wondered too much about, you know. As a matter of fact, I just started taking vocal lessons recently, and I was like, what is my register? What am I? And she goes, well, you're probably like a tenor. And I was like, oh, okay, cool, because I don't know. You know, I don't have much music theory, but it was more about creating a style, the style that people go, that I know that voice. And to me, that's the most important thing as a singer. You know, I mean, Lemmy is a great singer. Why? Because it's Lemmy, and you know him. Bon Scott, you know, Bon Scott was a crooner in his early days, but you know, like, it's not always about having this incredible, you know, range and background as far as music theory. It's rock and roll, and you just want to kind of be unique, and I think that's the most important thing. So. No, I was honored because, you know, the Anthrax guys are you know, an incredible band, and it was a bummer that they wanted to part ways with Joey Belladonna. They had just signed a big giant record deal with Elektra Records, so I'm sure the label was like, wait, what? You're canning your singer after you just signed this record deal? Can we hold on a minute? And the funny thing is, Motley Crue did the same thing. That was right when they parted ways with Vince Neil. So they signed these 2 big deals with these 2 big bands, and they both parted singers, which is kind of a quite weird thing at the time. But I was honored. But for me, again, Joey Belladonna was always a great singer and super unique sounding. Same kind of philosophy as what I'm saying. It's just to have your own thing. So for me, it was like, okay, am I going to work in this position? I know what I can do, but is this going to work? And then we started. I think the important thing was like, let's write some songs and let's see what comes out of it. And then, lo and behold, we made the record Sound of White Noise, which to this day a lot of people still think is, you know, a classic Anthrax record. And it went on to do really well. We had songs like Only and Room for One More, and you know, some big songs that I'm super proud of to this day. So, you know, it's really about blending, you know, styles and making sure things like that work. And it did. I mean, we wrote Only probably in like an hour, and once we wrote that song, it was like, whoa. This is really good, and you know, it sounds forward. It sounds forward for this band, and it was, because you know, I joined in the '90s, and it was a new decade, and everything was kind of changing and morphing, and there was some incredible bands like Soundgarden and Alice in Chains and Faith No More, and you know, it was a good time to kind of, you know, go with the flow, not losing any of the roots of what the band was, because it was always going to be powerful and heavy with, you know, Charlie and Frankie as the rhythm tandem, and of course Scott, and as, you know, amazing guitar player that he is. But, you know, it was about kind of embracing this new decade and going, we're going to roll with it. And then we made that record, and we made 4 albums. I'm all proud of all of them. They're really, really cool in their own kind of unique way. You know, I did a ton of shows, and, you know, I sang I Am the Law a million times. Well, not a million, but, you know, I embraced it. I was like, I adopted those songs, you know. That was kind of my theory. Is like, okay, I'm the adopted, you know, this is my adopted kid, so I'm going to give him the same kind of love. You know, again, me and Joey's voices are very different, but you know, unique in their own ways. And you know, look, Joey's back in Anthrax, and I think that's what it's meant to be. And you know, I'm an Armored Saint, and you know, just kind of it's the way it all was meant to be here in 2025. But yeah, you know, I'm really proud of those times with Anthrax. That is real. That actually happened before Armored Saint even started, really, for the most part. It was, again, back to Johnny Z, who was the manager of Metallica at first, and he became the manager of Anthrax. And he contacted me, which is kind of funny. And then he contacted me again about Anthrax. I'm like, wait, okay, this is 10 years later, and you're calling me about maybe joining this other band. It was kind of funny. But yeah, again, you know, it was an honor to be asked to sing in Metallica. I mean, I never can imagine anybody singing other than James Hetfield for that band. Ironically enough, I just saw James Hetfield and Lars and Robert Trujillo, because we played the Sonic Temple Festival in Columbus last weekend, and Metallica was one of the headlining bands. They headlined 2 nights actually, and those guys came and watched Armored Saint, and we played at like 3 in the afternoon, and that was very, very cool that they did that, because I was like, it's very nice you're here. I don't think I would be here at 3 in the afternoon if I was going on at 9, you know, but they did, and that shows that they still to this day, you know, kind of think high of us and give us the love, and it's really cool. So, you know, it was always an honor. It just was not my fate to be in Metallica. But you know, I did the one show, which was we did the 30th anniversary shows in the Bay Area. They played 4 nights at the Fillmore, and Armored Saint actually opened one, and then I came out and sang the 4 Horsemen with them, and they told the story about it, and you know, how we were gonna maybe get this guy, but it didn't happen, but this is what it would sound like if he did join. And that was really, you know, a special moment in my life, and you can see it on YouTube, and it was great, you know, it was cool. So, you know, again, there's always a connection, because Armored Saint ended up going out touring with Metallica on Ride the Lightning and March of the Saint for us, and you know, we have a lot of history together as friends. And one of the funny things is James, during Metallica set, said, I was stoked to see Armored Saint today. This is in front of, you know, 50,000 people when they were playing. We destroyed a lot of hotels together. I could have ruined metal, you know, that's just too much, man. That's too much pressure. Like I said, it just wasn't my fate. And I can never imagine anybody singing those songs or not having James Hetfield as a front man. That would have been a big loss for heavy metal. Like, he was meant to do that. And James became an incredible singer. He really just, like, you know, if you listen to, you know, Kill 'Em All to the Black Album, his progression was just off the charts, and he's still an incredible singer. So. Well, we were about 10 years in at that point with me as a singer, and you know, I think with the Anthrax is the cool thing about Anthrax. Well, I was in the band prior to me being in the band. After I've left the band, is that those guys are always willing to take chances. Those guys, I mean, they did I'm the Man, you know, they did Bring the Noise. They did things, you know, that were always just willing to stick their neck out and not just stay within the parameters of a metal band. And I think that's why they carved their own niche. And you know, I could say this while I was in the band or when I was out of the band, that they were this band that kind of was willing to take chances. And I'm proud I was part of that time when we made songs like Only. And then eventually We've Come For You All. It was kind of the same philosophy, like, let's just keep pushing the boundaries of songwriting. We have songs like Black Dahlia, which is a killer tune, and you know, Refuse to Be Denied, and then Safe Home was like kind of a love song that Scott wrote, and we're like, let's do it. You know, we can do it, and we can pull it off. And it was great. You know, we had Keanu Reeves in the video, and that was really awesome. And still really heavy aspects of that record. What Doesn't Die was the opening track, and it's a great album. A lot of people, I don't know, I mean, I'm proud of all the 4 records I made of Anthrax, so I don't want to say which one I think is most solid or the most consistent. I think they're all just kind of cool in their own way. Well, we're doing 3 shows with Wasp in September in Britain. We're going to play the Hammersmith Odeon, which I think is called the Apollo now. That's going to be awesome because it's a legendary place. Come on, No Sleep Till Hammersmith, Motorhead. So we're really excited about that. And then we're doing about 9 shows with Michael Schenker, and we're doing like 3 in the Southern California area. And he's going to do all UFO tunes, which is one of my favorite bands of all time. I mean, I pretty much I kind of created my vocal sound by emulating Phil Mogg in my garage when I was like 17 and trying to copy him, and among many others, Ronnie Dio included. So it's you know, it's going to be great going out there and playing shows with Michael. He's, you know, one of the greatest heavy metal guitar players there is, and you know, actually underrated if that's possible. So it's going to be great to do that, and then we're going to put a new record out next year. We've been writing a bunch of songs and been recording them, and we'll probably have it out in the spring, February, March, April of next year, and then probably be on the road a lot next year and do a lot of, hopefully, festivals in Europe and get to South America again. And we've only played once in Japan, so hopefully we'll get there, and I'm sure we'll tour a lot in the States, so in Canada, and we'll be playing new tunes, and the new songs sound great. We're proud of them. Probably a lot, actually, but I mean, nothing that keeps me awake at night. There were certainly things I would do differently. One of the things that always pissed us off back in the day is that Armored Saint never went to Europe and toured Europe or Britain properly. We didn't get to Europe until like 1991 for the first time. And, I was on the cover of Kerrang! Magazine. I'm like, shouldn't we be going to Britain? I mean, I'm on the cover. And they're like, no, we're going to focus on America. I'm like, yeah, but Wasp is going, and Rat is going, and Anthrax, and Metallica. Why are we going? Anyway, so that's probably something that still kind of irks me to this day, because through the years, we've obviously built up a great fan base and do really well in Britain and Europe. But I think we would have been a much bigger band had we been going consistently in the 80s. So that's one thing that irks me. But all in all, I mean, I can't think about it too much. We just do our thing, and I'm proud of everything I've done. So I can't get too caught up in mistakes that I made, because there's been plenty.